This is how Open changes products. My name is Karen Borchert, and I'm the EVP of Business Development at Phase 2. But for the past 5 years since I joined Phase 2, I've worked very closely on our product side. We are a services-based organization focused on open technology and specifically on content collaboration and experience software for a number of different industries. And along the way, as we've worked on so many custom implementations and so many custom solutions for our clients, we have developed a number of products along the way. And in that process, we have learned a lot of lessons about product development and about products in the open world. And it's a world that comes with a lot of questions. How can you create products or sell products in open source? And how can that be done most successfully, and what are the pitfalls we avoid? So we wrote a little talk about it together with some of my colleagues at Phase 2 who also work on it. So one of the products that we work on that I'm going to mention today is called Open Atrium. It's a collaboration solution built to open source on Drupal, and it is focused mostly on building intranets and collaboration tools for organizations. And I'll mention it later, and so that's why I wanted to mention it up front, so you didn't think I was crazy. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what I call the open product conundrum. And there's a little thing that happens, a challenge that happens when you're thinking about products in an open source world. And it's a little bit difficult. And it changes the way we do product development. It changes the way that we think about it sometimes. So in order to have a discussion about products, we have to talk really clearly here. We can't have a discussion about products in open source without really understand what we're talking about and also what we're not talking about. So a product is a good idea, method, information, object, or service created as a result of a process and that serves a need or satisfies a want, right? It's a thing that you are delivering that satisfies a specific business need. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about products. And in open source, the products are a little interesting. In open source, things work a little bit differently. In open source, we so often build tools and toolkits and not traditional packaged up products. And the reason for that is because tools and toolkits tend to be a little bit more conducive to contribution and to extension and to all of the open source goodness that's out there, and for all of the good reasons that we want people to contribute and join in the community of an open source tool or product. A lot of what we build there is frameworky, it's toolkitty, it's there to be extended and continued and used and changed over time, and that's great. That's a good thing. With open though, products work a little bit more like IKEA, and this is my best understanding of this is this way, and our VP of product explained it to me this way, and so I'm passing along this analogy for us. So, we have in open source, whoops, oh, I'm sorry. I think I messed that up. Let's try again. Here we go. Right. So you have all the right pieces, you've got all the right instructions, you've got a lot of the design, and you've got all the right thinking in there. And you can make a table out of it, right? Somebody will provide you all of the parts and all of the things that you need, but out of the box, it's not a table, right? It is a toolkit to make one. And in open, that's very often what we are building and what we are delivering. But when we're talking about software, most buyers are thinking about what they get out of the box, right? We are in an increasingly, put your credit card in here, get your software in return, click, it starts working, you can start building with it. We're in an increasingly out-of-the-box environment when it comes to the way we use and consume software. So a lot of our software buyers, in their minds, toolkits are not products. Being delivered a toolkit to build an IKEA table is not the same as buying a table. In the software world, that can be a little bit challenging. So Open Atrium, I mentioned, is a product that, we call it a product around our area, and people have a lot of things about it. They'll say it's an intranet in a box, it's a community portal, but it's open source, and they compare it to other out-of-the-box products. You can use it instead of SharePoint for this. But really, you see these different, iterations of it, these different ways you can use it. But Open Atrium, you download it, you see it, and you're like, yes, it's this open source product in a box. And you open it, and you're like, yay. And then you get into it a bit, and you're like, wait, what? Because in reality, it's a toolkit. It's an IKEA kit, and that's not a bad thing. But it is what it is. It's a toolkit. So people use it a lot of different ways. Some people use that toolkit and they build it just like we think they're going to. They build a table, and it's great. And some people will take it and just change a few things. So it's still a table, but it works a little bit differently. It looks a little different. Some people will use it for a completely different function. They'll take those same tools and reconfigure them in a different way so that instead of creating an intranet in a box, they'll create something completely different, but it still works and it's still using those same bits. And sometimes they get pretty creative and they combine, different pieces from different things, or they'll add different modules or things on. And sometimes they'll just make it look more beautiful or make it look different. And it's all that same toolkit, and that's cool, right? This is a great thing about open source, right? Sometimes they go completely nuts. Sometimes you see people take some of these open source toolkits and combine them with all kinds of things and take it in a direction that you wouldn't ever imagine. This is actually one of my favorite IKEA hacks I've ever seen. This is two of those little table sets turned into a kid's bike, which I think is super awesome. And this is what's awesome about open source, right? Like, this is exactly what we love about open source, but it creates this challenging thing for products because of one thing. A table is not a bike. And so you have to ask yourself, when you're looking at this kind of stuff and when you're developing this kind of stuff, are you selling a table or are you selling a bike? And that's the conundrum part. The very thing that makes open source products so awesome is what makes our products difficult to define and deliver and sell. And that creates a real challenge to us when we are thinking about the most amazing thing we could build. And we've been down this road a lot of times. We've built a newspaper website in a box, or a newspaper website for so many newspapers that we were like, we've got this. Well, let's create a product that'll build a newspaper site in a box. Well, it's really challenging to do that and have it still be as flexible and open source and as much of a toolkit as we want it to be in order for it to have that contribution and that sense of openness in the community. So we've been down this road. We have had some missteps. We've had some successes, but it remains a big challenge. The most important part of the challenge, I think, is to understand that it's there and know what you're investing and building in. So we try a lot of stuff, right? We say, okay, fine, okay. Toolkits are not products. Toolkits and hosting, is that a product? Okay, well, maybe not. Maybe, just having a hosted toolkit doesn't necessarily make it into, the table or the bike. And we say, maybe with hosting, and we make it really pretty and put a theme on it. Maybe that's a product. Still kind of a toolkit there. And it's really when you're getting all these things together, a whole bunch of different things together, hosting and services and automation and content and some combination of those is when you start to get toward a specific use case, towards your bike or your table. And that's when you start to approximate closer to something more like a product. And so making an open source product is really about one thing. It's about doing what's needed to start solving a customer problem on day one. And that's really what it comes down to. It doesn't actually exactly matter if you're combining the code with hosting or a theme or automation or these kinds of things. What you're putting into it matters less than this. That what you're looking to do with whatever you're building is to start solving your customer's problem on day one, not on day 30 after they've gotten really frustrated with the Allen wrench and they've thrown all of the IKEA pieces away. So why are products a good thing in open source? Why would we even go down this road? Number one, making your toolkit or into something more usable out of the box gives you the potential to bring it to more people, right? That's good for you. It's good for open source. It's good for your customers who are looking for it. The market is demanding open source alternatives. More and more and more people are seeing proprietary solutions out there and looking for an open source one. So there's a market opportunity for open source alternatives. And products provide a different opportunity for revenue and profit for a lot of organizations that work in open source and are working day to day on services and services kind of work. There's an opportunity or an idea of diversifying that revenue stream into more of a product stream, and that can be a really positive thing. But it comes down to about three things, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next part here. It's about understanding the value that you add and truly understanding where that is, understanding your market, and then understanding your business model and what you're actually and really selling. So we're going to talk a little bit about those three things in the context of going to market. So what does it mean in open to understand the value you add, the market, and the business model? So let's start with the value add. I'm from Nebraska, so there's almost always some sort of farm or farmer's market reference in one of my talks. I wouldn't let you get away with it. So consider the farmer. When I suppose that when you go to the farmer's market and you buy an apple, and you do this time of year, you have all of the things you need to make your own apple, right? Like you have all of the things you need. It is about as open source a product as it gets, right? All of the stuff that you might need to recreate and compete with that farmer who sold you the apple is right there in your hands. You can get the seeds and you can grow the tree and you can have apples too, and you can be doing all of that. But the idea of that is something we mostly don't even consider. Well, I'm not going to do that. That's not how I'm going to spend my time. Having an open source product like this it's great, but part of what I'm buying, the value in the open source apple that I'm buying, is really in what was done by somebody who knows better than I do on how to do it. And that's really the value that's added. The value that's added of the apple is not the apple seed or the fruit that's there, because that's available in a lot of places in a lot of ways. The value is that somebody grew it with organic farming practices and all sorts of great things like that. So beware of underemphasis of the value you add in creating open source products. So anyone can use this to build a blank is often not true. A lot of times our open source communities have thousands, hundreds, thousands of people all building with this same toolkit, and so it might seem like anybody could build this thing with this toolkit, but actually the end customer often can't. So don't assume that value is not something that you provide, and don't underemphasize the value you provide by providing the hosting, the customization, the configuration, the automation are all parts of the value that you add. And understanding where that value add is from you is all part of your business model around it. There's the we have two markets thing. So markets are really, really challenging, right? Because when you have an open source product, you really have two. You almost always have two, and that's because of the awesomeness that is an open source community. Most open source products have two markets: one that gives the product credibility, and one is usually the one that pays for it. And a lot of times those aren't the same community. So I pasted this sort of ugly graph in here. This is an adoption of the open source toolkit that we've published, and this is all adoption in the community. And as you can see, it's had this huge growth and this tons of adoption, and that is awesome. But nobody in there is paying us for this. None of them. I'm so glad they love it. We're so happy that they are downloading it and that they're using it and that they're lending it credibility, and they have something that they need that we provide to them as one of our markets. But they are one of our markets for this product, because they are other developers and other community members who are using it. Sometimes they are using it to sell to their clients and to build things for each other. But they're not necessarily the customer buying it.
But you benefit from them.
We do.
Because they lend credibility to your product.
And they contribute to the product. And the credibility, the market is extremely important. It mustn't be ignored. But there are often two markets. So there's the understand who who you're serving, building for, selling to, and expecting things from is really important. We make an investment in both of those markets in terms of how we invest in this product, because if you ignore the market that gives you credibility, it doesn't matter how big the market is of people that can pay you, because they're not going to pay you if your product has no credibility. And credibility is gained in an open source world, in that open source market, and in that community market. So it's extremely important to maintain both. So the community market has different needs, right? They want tools, they want flexibility, they need documentation, and they need a well-maintained product that they trust. And they are not planning to give you money most of the time. Sometimes they are for specific things, but it's not, as a whole, that's not the purpose of that market. That's not the purpose of your open source community around a product. The purpose of it is to be possible contributors, champions, and even salespeople for what you're putting out into the world. Your paying market wants something that is very often wants more of an out-of-the-box experience. They need a way to explain the value of this thing to their boss. And they sometimes check in with the community to see if you suck at maintaining it. So there's this important interplay, but you can see that the time you spend and invest in a product is time spent when you're investing in your community market and you're investing in your paying market. Sometimes there's crossover between those activities, but sometimes you have to invest in different activities to serve both of those markets. And that's just an investment decision of where you're spending and when, and how to balance that credibility and payment. So I want to say thank you to Andrew Hall, who's here, who provided me a really nice summary of a couple of open source business models. I am not an open source licensing expert nor an open source business model expert, but Andrew is, and we met and chatted, and he gave a really great talk yesterday about licensing and open source, and I would highly recommend that you watch his talk and then hire him if you're looking for an IP lawyer. But before that, I'll just kind of walk you through. What I thought was an awesome summary of a couple of models that are in open source that you see regularly in open source as a way to monetize some of and provide that value out to the market. So there's dual licensing. There's the ability to actually have two licenses on the same software. There's the open core and freemium model where you have a community version of the open source product or of the product, and then you have an enterprise version that costs money, and that's something you see pretty regularly. There's the kind of model around paid plugins and themes and add-ons to an open source product. So you see that a lot with WordPress and the way that's monetized. You see closed source customization, so an open model that is then has a closed version of it for specific commercial customizations, and then you see a lot of work around services, and you see those with whether those are customization services or support services. There's a lot of those, and these are obviously not all of the business models, but I thought it was a great overview, and I wanted to include it here. But people buy all kinds of stuff in open products, right? And some of these things are very services-y, and some of them are more automated and more product-y. But people buy a lot of things in open products, and it's really a matter of figuring out which ones are right for the model and for the market and for the value add that you're trying to serve. So this is my best explanation of this. It stems from Tina Seelig at the Stanford Technology Ventures program, who I love, and she gives this really great analogy about your life and how to find your career. And I promise you, it applies to our business model thing in just a second. So this is how she explains it. She says there's what you're good at, and there's what you love, and there's what somebody will pay you to do. And when you hit two of the three, you don't have a career. So if there's something that you love to do and somebody would pay you to do it, but you're no good at it, you're probably a fan of it. I would love to say that I am a professional runner who gets paid to do so, but I'm actually not that fast. So I'm a fan of running. It's something you're good at and something you love, but nobody's going to pay you to do it, it's a hobby. And when it's something you're good at and something somebody will pay you for, but you don't really love doing it, it's a job. And when you happen to hit the sweet spot of all three of those things, that's where you find your career, that intersection of what somebody will pay you for, what you love, and what you're good at. And I loved this model, and actually this is the model that we generally use when we think about business models too. So it's not actually very different. So the question to ask yourself to help find whether this is your business model is, are you good at delivering this? Will somebody pay you for it? Same thing. And is it aligned with your mission? Do you, similarly to, is it something you love to do as a person? Is it something your company is passionate about? Is it something your company loves to do? And if it is in this category, it's you're good at it and somebody will pay you for it, but it's not mission aligned, it's a bill payer, right? It's something that might pay the bills for you, but it isn't really what your company wants to do. If it's aligned with your mission and you're really good at delivering it, but nobody wants to pay you for it, at best it's going to be a loss leader, and at worst it's just going to be a loss. And if it's aligned with your mission and somebody will pay you for it, but you're no good at it, it's probably somebody else's business model, not yours. And that sweet spot in the middle is that's where our business model is. That's where you find it. It's when it's aligned with the company's mission and vision, when somebody will pay you to do it, and you're actually really damn good at it. So that's what you're looking for. So what about services? A lot of people get kind of squirrely when they start talking about services and products, because they say, oh, it's not really a product because you're just selling services around it. And services can be a really important part of any business model for a product, whether it's open source or not. So defining and automating and packaging those services can help you productize them a little bit. You don't have to deliver a completely custom set of services every time you deliver those services. You can actually start to create some order around those things. And it's not less of a product just because services is a key business model. In case you need further proof, go check out those guys with the red top on their building around the corner. So how to do it? A couple of different things. First, do a damn market study. It's not as hard as you might think. This is the really, really stupid graphic from a pretty elementary market study that we did around Open Atrium, where we just said, okay, who are all of these players out there in the market that are providing something similar to what we're doing? And what's their focus? Is it assets or communications? Are they platform or purpose-built? And we just plotted people out, and we started to understand how big they were, and we started to say, where does a product like ours, where does this solution that we built open source fit along that? And that very simple exercise was key to understanding what we were trying to do and how it would affect what we were building into the roadmap. Write a business plan. It can be 2 pages, value, market, model, and goals. And then be sure the right people are bought in and are carrying out that plan. And as you're thinking about the business model, those are sort of, I think, the three key things to that. So questions people ask. People ask us a ton of questions about open source and products. So I will offer you a few of them in advance. Is this going to be expensive? People ask us this all the time. Is it expensive to build a product in open source? Not necessarily, but it's not going to be free. Poor planning and budgeting for taking a product to market is the equivalent of throwing bad money after good, throwing good money after bad. I always get that mixed up. Invest properly or don't invest at all, right? So understanding, again, that kind of comes back to the market study and understanding really where your sweet spot business model is to say, what do we really need to invest in order to take this value to this market, and not just one market, probably, remember, but both markets, both your community market and your paying market. Am I going to make money on my product this year? I love this question. It's such a crystal ball question. I think it's amazing that people think I might have an answer. Maybe, but you shouldn't count on it unless your go-to-market spend is focused on a very, very fast ROI, right? Don't bet the farm on your product business until you've tested it in the market. And if you are looking for something that's going to have a very fast turnaround, then you're going to have to invest in a very fast go-to-market. And that's a different kind of model than kind of slowly releasing an open source product and seeing how it changes in the community over time and then seeing what happens with it is very different than a very fast, let's make money right away on this kind of market strategy. Both viable, both possible, just different. This is my favorite one. Everyone seems to charge $10 a month for this kind of thing, so I'm just going to charge that. Is that cool? This is a tough one. Pricing is kind of a dark art. You need to charge what the product is worth and what people will pay for it and what you can afford to sell it for. So you've got to do a little, this is where that market analysis is kind of important. It's important to know not just who you're competing with and what they're charging, but also if you can provide it for that much money or if you're providing a different value. So how much do I gain from selling this minus how much did it cost for me to do it divided by how much does it cost for me to do this, that's your ROI and it should be positive. Having a way, if you find that you can't sustain a product at the prices that the market demands, you need to change something, either the price or the model or the market or the value that you're producing. So I think a lot of people go down a very slippery slope quickly of saying, we're going to create an open source version of X. And that can be wonderful, but it's not always based on the way it's developed or the way you need to invest in it. It's not always possible to offer it in a competitive pricing scheme to other things in the market, and understanding that upfront can save you quite a lot of time and money and heartache. And then finally, we hear this from a lot of organizations who are a services company too, or a services company first, and who say, I'm not sure we want to be a products company. I'm not sure we are a products company. And that's an important thing to note. It's very hard to be successful in product efforts without organizational buy-in. Consider a pilot program or a time box trial or a set budget with really clear success measures if you're an organization that's moving from being all services and all custom kind of work to moving towards trying to launch into an open source product, as many are. Nobody wants these things to become a money pit, but you also have to give them a chance to succeed. So deciding on what that investment is can be really, really key. And then write a business plan for real. You will be happy you did, even if it's for one tiny theme or module or piece of functionality or something huge. And even if you only are the only one that reads it, you won't be sad you did. So let's review. Few things. Oh, where's my bike? There's my bike. Few things. Development. You can either focus development on a specific use case, or you can sell a framework or toolkit, but you can't do the very same thing in the very same product most of the time. That's that question of, are we building and selling a toolkit, or are we building and selling a product that has a specific use case? And understanding that is really important. Value. Know the value of what you're providing to your customer, and recall it's value to them, not value to you. I'm not going to grow an apple tree just to get an apple. I'm just going to go buy it from the guy that does. Market, beware the two markets and invest appropriately. And business model, keep it simple, find the sweet spot. Those are kind of my four main takeaways. That's me. I'm always available via email and Twitter and stuff. And also happy to take your questions. I don't know how long that just was. So thanks very much. Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding Atrium.
Okay.
It looks like, is that something that's usually installed on a server? Is that right?
Yes.
And so it's not a distributed, okay. So it's GPL version 2, so do you guys offer like a commercial license to it, or?
We don't. It's a distribution of the Drupal code base, and it's available on Drupal.org as a free distribution.
And so is your monetization mostly that you will do these installs for customers, or customize it, or support it, or maintain it, that sort of stuff?
Our business model around it has been around customizations and custom implementations and integrations with other systems. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Do you want to have any stories to share, comments, needs, hopes, dreams? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, so I work for Chef. You all may or may not know what Chef is, but we are definitely an open source company. We kind of did the open core thing for a while. We more switched to doing the add-on model. Our base product that manages your infrastructure is totally free, and our thing is you can use this for as many nodes in your infrastructure as you want, completely free. If you want the add-ons, then that's free up to 25 nodes, and then you pay us beyond that, and those are not open source. And it has worked really well for us. Like you said, there are kind of two markets. I mean, the thing that we have in our core is if you don't want to pay us for an add-on, it's built off all the same APIs in the open source product, and you can go build it yourself. But I think the lesson we've learned is your larger customers will pay you for access. I think that was one point that I didn't see up there. I thought all the rest of it was spot on. But they don't always necessarily want to participate in the community.
Right.
So they will pay you to have access to get their voice kind of heard. And we're somewhat unique in that a lot of our larger customers do also participate in the community.
Yeah. That's a great one. I'll add that. Thanks. Right back there.
Can you go back to the slide where you listed all the different business models?
Sure.
And I know there's, no one perfect solution, but
That
in
one?
your opinion, if you had to, if you had to rank those.
Oh, I couldn't because that's not. They're not really rankable. It's really about the specific need and use case, and it's about the customer that's buying it. So there are opportunities for services where that is absolutely the best model. Where so for instance. Atrium is actually a really good example of that right now because it is so toolkitty and frameworky, and because it is freely available as an open source distribution, but it's pretty blank when you see it that way. Services is a really, really good option there because people who want to use it don't often know or have the expertise in order to customize it. So services is really, really good there, and something like something like a paid plugin for it could be a possibility. But depending on the product itself and exactly how it's going to be used and who is going to be using it, these models are different. And also, I think, in part, based on how it's licensed and how the licensing is. And again, Andrew could totally tell you more about that than I could. But I don't think they're rankable. I think that they are applicable to specific needs. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.